Hello, I'm Dr. Ziggy Kazicki. Welcome to the Slippery Slope. Today we're going to spend some time looking at water wars. And in fact, you'll get a chance to meet a couple of water warriors in this program. Jeff Ostahowski is one of my guests. He's from the Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. And Mike Tallard, who's an economist who is a consultant to many different industries in Michigan. So to begin with, this is an important time for all of us as we look at what's going on in our environment. As climate change takes place, we're seeing that the water wars have started. And in fact, one of the particular important things that we have to be looking at is how the conditions have changed drastically around the world. What we are seeing is that the effects of the use of water is starting to have an important negative problem for almost all of the groups around. So underground water is being pumped so aggressively now around the globe that land is sinking, civil wars are being waged, and agriculture is being transformed. So we all need water. We know that. Water does so many things that we count on every day. We take it for granted. And as you look at this graphic here, you can see that there are so many things that you couldn't do as a person if you didn't have water. And having access to water is important. It's probably going to be more important as time goes by, as I'm going to point out and as my guests are going to point out in just a minute. So we think about fresh water as being abundant, but it really isn't. Only about 2.5% is fresh and not salty and brackish. And about 2% of the entire supply of water are in our glaciers. Now in Michigan, we're fortunate. We've got 12% of the world's fresh water supply right here. 20% of the world's fresh water is in the Great Lakes around us. So when we look at the need for changes, Mike and others will talk about that. Let's have Jeff explain a few things about how he sees water in Michigan.
The Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. We are a conservation group that tries to focus on the wise use of water. Michigan is a state with abundant water resources, but we have lots of challenges and we have lots of demands upon those water resources. We have about 12% of the world's fresh water that is part of Michigan. It's a lot of water, and we don't necessarily value it as closely as we need to. We have lots of people who are currently using it, and one of the areas that our group is concerned about is oil and gas industry uses lots of fresh water. We have about 7,000 wells that use water pretty much on a daily basis, and they use fresh water to enhance their oil and gas production. We believe that that industry should use brine water, the water that they produce when they make oil, when they bring up their oil and gas, they get associated produced water, which has a high salt and brine content. And that water could easily be used to enhance oil and gas production. There's an area of course, dealing with the people who take water for beverage use. Nestle, of course, has been in the news. We believe that fresh water is part of the commons that is owned by all the citizens of Michigan, and that a resource like water should not be given away to the world's largest food and water company. What we believe is that, they should have to pay a lot for it, and and we need to recoup the money that they pay and use it for infrastructure for water treatment programs and wastewater treatment programs, and to buy down the debt in some of our largest cities that have lost lots of population.
Well, Jeff is an interesting man. He's one of the water warriors. He actually was a chef, he's an author. There's many things, he's a father, but he's taken an interest in what's going on in the world around us. And so we need to be conscious of the fact that there are many people like him who are involved in so many of the things that are important to all of us. Now, the United Nations water policy really spells out the need for us to think about water as a human right. Back in 2010, the United Nations General Assembly actually went through the process of making this known, and around the world is pretty much recognized as important. Fresh water sustains human life, is vital for human health, and we have to have access to it. So why is it then companies like Nestle's, which operates here in Michigan, is in the opposite position? The CEO of Nestle's has said that water is not a human right. It should be privatized. He said this in 2013, by the way, which was 3 years after the United Nations declared it was a human right. So what is Nestle's doing in Michigan? It's pumping millions of gallons out of our state. But think about this. This picture here that you see shows Brazil, South America. And one of the largest aquifers in the world is now controlled by Nestle's and Coca-Cola. And so people down there have lost control of their water to a private entity. And that's one of the things that the water warriors are really concerned about. So there's a limit to our global water supply. And this shows the groundwater around the world. And you can see in the United States, for instance, we've got an aquifer that stretches down from Canada into the plains, and then one along the Gulf Coast, and of course then there's the Great Lakes. If you look around the world, you see that there's these other aquifers spread out. That's all the groundwater we have. Keep in mind it took 10,000 years for many of these aquifers to fill up, and we're taking water out of there at a rate where they can't recharge. These aquifers will eventually end up getting below 50 feet. And once that happens, then it becomes very difficult to get the water out of them. So what can happen? Well, here's an interesting look at the world as it might look in just a few years, 2030. The red zones that you see on this map are stressed areas. If you look at the United States, far to the left there, you'll see that over half of the United States is stressed. That means that they're really fighting to get water. They don't have it, and they're looking for it. And if you look across the world there, you see those dark patches? Those are deserts. There is no water there. Or if there is, it's so far down below, it's almost impossible to get out. Now, the Saudis are doing it, but they have means to do so. Now, if you look across the whole globe there, then you see that there's lots of red zones, lots of places that there's going to be water shortages, water stresses. And what will happen will be water wars. People will be fighting for water. And this is going to be a difficult time for us in the future. In fact, some people have said water is probably going to be more valuable than oil and maybe even gold. So the worldwide water threats to our groundwater have to be considered as something that we can do something about now. And we know there's going to be drought. And we know right now we have bad management of pumping of this water. We have leaky pipes. We've got an aging infrastructure, inadequate technology, and we've got population growth. Along with that, a demand for more food production. And about 70% of the fresh water goes into food production. This is putting a tremendous demand on our groundwater. So what can we do? Well, we have to think about the future. And the worldwide water threats to people and animals is something that we can't just excuse away. We can't think it's going to take care of itself. In the time that we're living in, we still have industrial waste. We still have animals that are being killed because of the 2,000 chemicals that are going into the water. We have red algae tides that are sweeping in across the world because of climate change. Consumption of polluted water, both microbiological and chemical contaminations, are the biggest threat we have right now as a public health epidemic. Water scarcity by 2025 is going to affect half of the world's population. So let's hear from Jeff, one of our water warriors, about what he thinks about this.
The Flint problem is serious. We have issues with the way that the water treatment did not occur in appropriate manner, and we have issues with respect to contamination. We believe that water is threatened by injection wells. When we get contamination from other states, we don't know what is in those trucks that come in and dump from out of state. We don't know what the lists are of all the chemicals. We don't know how much radioactivity there is. We have serious issues with the DEQ. Our Department of Environmental Quality has not turned down an application for an injection well in more than 12 years.
Hi, we're back. So everybody likes to think about Michigan as their hand, surrounded by water. But that hand is really watersheds. It's a place where lots of groundwater collects. Much of that runs into the lake. And what we see is these different watersheds are part of an ecosystem, something that's very vibrant, puts a lot of life into so many places. Those ecosystems have been around for a long time, and they're really important for us to manage. Otherwise, what's going to happen is all of these ecosystems are going to fail. And so the very nature of the Great Lakes is at stake if we don't do a good job of managing the ecosystem. If we're leaking chemicals, contaminants, raw sewage, all of this kind of stuff into that watershed, then that's exactly what the Great Lakes will become, an open sewer. And we don't want that. So, you and I have to think about what is our place in this world. And you can see this picture really shows that people are willing and ready to fight for water. The Food and Water Watch people are just many of the warriors that are out there right now taking on the establishment, which in some ways is really short-sighted, not really thinking about long-term effects, and will probably leave many of us wondering what happened if we don't do something about it soon. In fact, the time to act is now. We can't wait. And the water warriors are looking for more people all the time. And I'm sure that you could become one if you have an interest in it. So think about it. How important is water to you? When you go to take that next glass of water at the restaurant or at your home, think about what would happen if you couldn't get it. What would happen if it cost you $10, for instance, for a glass of water at a restaurant? Or the restaurant said, we don't have any water today. Would you like something else? You know, those are all possibilities. And the only way we're going to avoid that is if we really take action. So people are taking action in Michigan. Here's some good examples. You know, Flint Water Plant is up there because everybody knows about Flint now. Flint, Michigan was basically poisoned with lead because of bad planning. Nestle's up in Osceola, in the Everett area, Big Rapids area, has been in a constant battle with residents who are really displeased with how Nestle's is taking water out of the system and essentially changing thousands of years of ecology in that watershed. People in Kalkaska are upset because the fracking is turning water into a toxic neurotoxin instead of something that they can use. Millions of gallons of chemicals are being dumped into the watershed. People are concerned about the Enbridge Line 5. It's a 64-year-old pipeline that crosses under the Straits of Mackinac. and it's got like 25,000 gallons going through it in a minute. It is a line that should be replaced or moved, and it runs right through one of the most sensitive areas in the Great Lakes. So people are taking up, they're starting to take action. They want you to recognize that this is important for all of us, and it is. The latest threat comes from PFAs. Now, they've been around a long time. When they closed the air base in Oscoda, Wurtsmith Air Base, people started to recognize that the drinking water there was affected. Actually, the military knew about it before then and were concerned about it. PFAs are emerging as contaminants in many places because they've been used. Now we have 28 locations located in the state of Michigan in 15 different communities that are located on this map here. There's more locations than that, but those are just the ones we're just discovering. And part of the reason we don't know about this is we don't test adequately for the over 2,000 chemicals that probably exist in the water system. I want to introduce Mike Tallard to you, a PhD economist and somebody who knows a little bit about water. I'm sitting here with Mike Tallard. He's running for state senate in the 35th district. He's an economic consultant and author. He's running as a Democrat. We're going to talk about water and economics. So, Mike, how should we look at water in Michigan from an economic standpoint?
Well, economists are always concerned about the rate of utilization of water, and that means not only how fast we're consuming it, but how fast we are, for lack of a better term, destroying it. So when you're talking about something like the Nestle plant, for example, at 400 gallons per minute, even the DEQ's own simulation said that the rate of surface water is going to deplete to slightly more than 1% per year over the course of the 20-year simulations. Over 20 years, we're going to see a 20% drop in surface water. Now, the entire area is nothing but marshes and lakes and rivers. So we're talking about a very, the destruction of a very expensive area to restore.
Okay. What do you think the economic impact of that's going to be?
Oh, massive. Absolutely. Now, you talk about something like Line 5. We have, and the concerns for an oil spill, we have kind of a precedence on the cost of that based on oil spills in the ocean and so forth and what it costs to clean that up. That's a little bit easier because really more than anything we're just talking about the cost of a cleanup, and that's been estimated at about $6 billion if Line 5 really has a spill. If we're talking about the destruction of marshlands that are all interconnected across a vast portion of central and northern East Michigan.
That's the 4th congressional district. Yeah.
Yes.
Mostly,
yeah, most of it. Yes. What we're talking about is a lot of farmland that's going to be affected and a lot of natural ecosystem that's going to be destroyed, and it is a lot more expensive to clean this up because you're not just talking about pulling anything from the water. You actually have to restore life to the area because, like with the proposed potash plant in Osceola County right now.
This is the newest threat.
This is the newest threat, right? And we're talking about what they're worried about is a spill of toxic brine into the area. Well, once you do that, once you to use a phrase I think I heard you say, once you release the genie out of that bottle, well, there's no putting it back in. It's going to kill everything in its path. This stuff is toxic as hell. So, in order to restore this, in order to fix this problem, what we end up with is not only cleaning up the mess, but then restoring life to that area so that it can return to its natural, useful state that we can use for agriculture and for personal use and things of that nature, because it'll take some time for that to happen. The thing is, especially with like Michigan Potash, is that they're LLCs, limited liability companies, right? The assets that these companies have come nowhere near what it would cost to clean this up.
And we saw this with Valsco Chemical and other organizations like that that caused tremendous damages in communities like Alma, and then they left and there was no money to fix it.
Yeah, it's left on the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So there's, they have their escape path, and everything's left on the taxpayers. We can try to seize assets and liquidate what we can, but it comes nowhere near what it costs to restore the state of things.
So the economic impact is the state gets stuck with the bill, the company disappears, and farmers are out of business. Communities don't have drinking water. There's a tremendous loss that will take 20, 30, 40, maybe 100 years to fix.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
In order for us to manage our water, we need a charter between the government and the people. We need to be working together with the government and not against the government or the government against us. This is really important to keep in mind. And so one of the things that I've proposed, and this is some time ago, this is not recently, is that Michigan needs a water testing center, a water center to conduct level 1 and level 2 evidence-based testing. And what would that accomplish? Well, I'll run through the quick list here. Identify threats to community drinking water, identify quantity and waterborne pathogens that are out there, create an index of drinking water quality by community, establish a timeline for future research, develop a prototype for community water testing that can be used throughout the whole state, create a foundation for the development of this level 1 testing. And let me point out, level 1 testing means we could look at the water and then we could look at what kind of health issues are taking place in the community, and through epidemiological studies determine if the water is causing illnesses or causing bad problems. We could establish a baseline from which to make future comparisons in water quality, bring together university and government and private interests to develop a water quality research center and a business model for developing a water valley, a water product system, provide public health agencies with useful information about water quality. How about a water quality index every day so you know what your water is like, just like we have air quality index, and establish testing systems that are going to support the quality of water in your community. And we could do this very easily. We could put testing centers in every government building across the state of Michigan and monitor the water, send the data back to the water quality center, and then we would have an index and we could go ahead and do things in a way that would lead from evidence, not from who knows what today. So these are the kind of things that we have to think about. You and I want plenty of good drinking water, and we deserve it. It's a right. We know that. So we can't let somebody tell us it isn't, and we can't tell them that we're going to give up. We all have to be water warriors. You're a water warrior. I'm a water warrior. We all have to get behind this. And once we get behind this, then we are going to hold on to the public trust. Everybody has to be in this. You have to think about this as being one of those things that is an obligation, not just for you, but for your children and for your grandchildren. Because if we don't obligate ourselves to do this, then the day will come where there is no water. Please, be a water warrior.
Valuing our water will create lots of jobs. And